In this video, I'm going to walk you through Lesson 9 of Unit B1 from Open Sci-Ed. Okay, so if you remember, we ended with Lesson 8. It was the end of the second lesson set. So this is the beginning of the third and final lesson set of the storyline, and we're going to answer the overarching question, how can we use what we learned to protect the land? And so we ended Lesson 8 using that SAGE modeler and looking at all the interactions in the ecosystem, and we defined biodiversity and keystone species, and we kind of realized that something might be missing from our model. So we come into this lesson, we navigate into the lesson by considering what is this missing piece in our model, and we quickly realize that it's humans, and we brainstorm how humans may be interacting with the components in the Serengeti. And here is the slide to support you. There's some guiding questions about how do you think we interact when we visit a park or a protected space, or how do humans interact with land and water where we live? And so we're kind of looking at related phenomena or related components in our ecosystems to think about how humans might be interacting in the Serengeti. We then watch a part of an interview with Dr. Simon Mduma, and we try to identify, as we're listening to this video, who the different interest holders are that he's talking about. And so this video you can see here is linked. He's going to talk about, we already were introduced to him earlier in the unit. And so we're going to listen to him and try to pull out who is he mentioning in this video about who's interacting or who wants to have some benefit from this conservation plan. And so we identify the different interest holders. We're going to set up in our notebook the interest holders we're listening to. So this might be the tourism industry and might be farmers. And so different people that have interest in conservation of the Serengeti and what their interactions are with the ecosystem. So we set up our notebooks and we listen as we watch the video, and then we're going to make a class list. There is an answer key in the teacher guide. And so the interest holders would include people living near the park, researchers like Dr. Simon Mduma, and conservation groups, park management, local tribes, tourists. And these are all the ways that they interact with that ecosystem. So we're going to make a public display of these different interest holders and their interactions. And then we're going to revise our class consensus model. Now, this is actually from the SAGE modeler. So I mentioned in the materials prep list that it asked for a copy of this to be handed out. Basically, students are going to add humans into this model and then kind of annotate and add the interactions that they have with these different components in the ecosystem. So you can do this either by handing it out, pencil and paper, and they annotate the pencil and paper, or if you want to save on color copies or you don't have color copies or it doesn't print well, you could just have this as a discussion if needed. So then we look back at our completed graphic organizers. This comes from Lesson 2. Now, in Lesson 2, they filled this out as they were introduced to the first time to the conservation plan in the Serengeti. So if you remember, we looked at what places, lands, and waters are included. So what's in the system, what components, species, animals, what kinds of things are living there, the interactions between these things. And we did actually mention the relationship of human to these species at that time, or we tried to find that as we went through the conservation plan. And then some decision making. So this was our lens as we looked at the conservation plan the first time. It also helped introduce us to the Serengeti. But now we're going to use this to evaluate their conservation plan. We're going to bring up this idea of nature versus culture. So these are two different views that people can have. And there's actually in the teacher guide, it says the students might even suggest a different image or a different way to think about it. But one is where humans are on top, and it's kind of like a hierarchical pyramid. And the other one is that humans are just a part of the system and we're all equal components. And so these images are supposed to spark ideas. This is just an initial idea conversation. So we're not looking for any specific ideas. But then we're going to use that lens of how humans are interacting with the ecosystem to evaluate that conservation plan. And we'll do this in pairs. And so here is a handout. This is the first time that students are introduced to the conservation evaluation tool. This is going to help prepare them for an assessment that hits a couple standards on related to these things, using criteria to evaluate a solution that affects an ecosystem. I'm saying that wrong, but you get the idea. So we are going to go through this. We're going to talk about who is making these decisions, what are their goals and actions, what are their outcomes, what data do we need to get to these outcomes, what do we need to collect, what's the impact. We kind of understand that impact of the conservation plan before we can evaluate whether it was a good plan or a not so good plan. We're going to walk through the conservation plan and then also answer a few questions related to the conservation plan using that graphic organizer. And then we're going to be introduced to a new challenge. So this was evaluating the original conservation plan of basically conserving the biodiversity in the Serengeti. But now we're introduced to a new challenge, and that is a proposed road. And so there's some videos that support this, but there's a proposed road that's about 30 miles long, and it's proposed to go through this area of Tanzania. And so it connects existing roads on the east and the west sides of the park, very important to many different people. But obviously, there's going to be some impacts on the different components in the ecosystem. And so we watch a video, talks about different kind of ideas about this road, and we're going to record some ideas in our notebook. You're going to have students listen for details that they hear about the road. Again, listening for interest holders. Can you see who has interest in this road? Do people want to trade? Where do people need to go? What are their wants and their needs for this road? So this gives them a purpose for listening to the video, where again, our lens is about interest holders. And then we're going to read more about it using these interest holder cards. Now you can see that there are tourists, conservationists, young youth leader, the government. We've got some villagers, and we also have a wildlife foundation. And so we've got different interest holders, and we're going to use this to even deepen our understanding of the wants and needs of these different interest holders to finish our recording our ideas in our notebook. So then we look at 3 proposed roads, and you can see that one of them is the original one we were introduced to that connects the east or west to the east. And then you've got 2 others. So there's a route that goes through here, another one that goes through the bottom. The black are the existing roads. And so these new colors right here are the red, the blue, the green. These are the new proposed roads. Now we're going to use this to help them evaluate these different roads to figure out which one meets the needs of the most number of interest holders in the end of this lesson. Okay, so we explore the different road proposals, and this one, you're going to group students and they're going to look at one road. So every student in the group is going to have a copy of this card. So we're going to have road proposal card 1. Every student will have a copy of this. We'll use this information to complete our road proposal organizer, and then other groups will evaluate the other roads and we'll jigsaw this. So from which criteria are you evaluating the road proposals? Why is this criteria important? Which proposal seems to be the best option? So first, they're going to complete the road proposal organizer in groups with like people, so with that all are looking at the same road, and then we mix them up, we share, and we evaluate one proposal to figure out which one best meets the need of most people. Now, this is a group evaluation or a group assessment, and so it's preparing them for their individual assessment, but they're going to be looking at, they're going to make a decision, they're going to rank the criteria. Here's the criteria. Which one do you think would be the highest priority for tourists? which one would you think would be the highest priority for conservation? So they're going to rank from 0 to 5. This is actually kind of a scaffold for something we call decision matrix that comes later in different units, but basically very similar thing happening here. And then considering impacts. And so they're going to go through this together and basically make a decision at the end. Which road proposal do you think meets the needs of the greatest number of interest holders? And so this is all in preparation to then take the individual assessment. I'm not going to open this up, and I'm going to unlink this eventually because I don't want students to have access, but then this leads to an individual assessment, all using these same ideas about evaluating a proposed solution using all the ideas we've developed so far. All right, let's talk about materials prep in the next video.